it's gonna just have to do for now. Hello, what's up, you guys? Good morning, or good, whatever time it is, wherever you are. I was just listening to an audio note. I was gonna attach to a video that I was gonna post today, and that video is still gonna go up. But as I was listening to the audio note, I thought maybe I would wait a week or two before I circled back around to that concept. I have some other things that I'm working on right now that I'm like focused on. And so I was kind of mentally preparing myself as I was listening to it and making mental notes and then thinking about brainstorming and then wanting to put it off. That's not going to happen. I'm going to do it now. So I'm just going to do like a quick little disclaimer and explanation for how something to keep in mind as you're listening to this, and you're going to see me draw some things up, and I'm going to put together like a quick little diagram. It's going to be a really rough draft, and I just want you to keep some stuff in mind as you're listening because of the nature of what I'm about to do. Okay, so normally for these types of concepts, I go through many stages of drafting, and that can take me weeks to months to even years. So it's kind of up in the air whenever something comes to my mind. I get an idea from the universe, from God. I'm like, hell yeah, this is great. But I want to present it a certain way. I want to put it together and package it nice and pretty. So that's going to take me some time. So I go through drafting processes. A lot of them are mental before it turns into physical drafting. And then eventually, excuse me, eventually I come to a point where I'm ready to put it in something that I can consider like a final product that I'm willing to see the light of day without feeling any type of shame or embarrassment. Okay, like before the perfectionism can get at me, I'm like, I'm happy with this, I'm actually content with this before I let other people see it, whatever. So this is some real time exploration of that. Okay, um this is definitely going to be a draft. I cannot stress that enough. That's part of why I really didn't want to do it right now, but I started to feel that urge and like that nudge. So I'm just gonna go with it. So if at any point you see me write or draw anything, or I'm explaining something, making some type of point, or attempting to at least, and you feel like it doesn't make sense, or you have a counter argument, or you just simply have a question for to gain more information or more understanding about something that I presented, please feel free to comment those things down below. I'm not opposed to any type of feedback or input or questioning or counter arguments or, you know, polite disagreements, whatever. Like, because this is a draft, I'm almost expecting this to not be airtight. And so that would be cool to see where other people might see flaws or they might see gaps in the information and how I'm connecting things, because then that helps me refine it and get it to that nice, pretty packaged point. Okay. Okay, cool, great. Now that the disclaimer is done, I'm gonna jump straight into this. So, like I said, there is kind of like an introductory part one. It's a really short video, and you'll hear me talk a little bit about the concept that I'm going to dig into today. The main theme that I was discussing was about fantasies and imagination and the differences between the two and how those ideas connect to manifestation when it comes to ideas like visualization, um, feeling it real, which is a Neville Goddard concept. Um, Essentially, like embodying the state of what you're manifesting. A lot of the times it one of the simplest ways that you can do that is through visualization, and visualization requires imagination. So honestly, so do a lot of the other techniques like scripting, and what's another good one that you really have to think about a lot. I'll kind of let that float in the air for a moment, but I think anything outside of robotic affirming or like the 369 method where you're writing things repetitiously, like those are adjacent to each other or related to each other. The 369 method and repetition, one of them is just you saying the thing over and over. The other one is you writing the thing over and over. That doesn't require a lot of imagination at all. Maybe as far as the affirmation that you're using, but that's pretty much it, right? So otherwise, when it comes to manifestation, it does require a lot of imagination. And something that I've been observing a lot in the community is people saying things like they can't imagine, they can't visualize, they have trouble seeing things. And I think that that's what makes people fall back into techniques like robotic affirming. I think there's a reason why robotic affirming doesn't work. It doesn't produce the results that everyone wants across the board. There's a really specific reason why I think that is, but that's not what this video is about right now. That's like a whole other topic that we can definitely talk about if someone is interested. But I guess I'm just gonna start with fantasy because I had also in that introductory video, I started talking about the brain and the left versus the right side of the brain and how those things connect to imagination and fantasy. So I guess I'm going to start with fantasy because that feels like where a lot of the cloudiness actually exists. This is the Webster Dictionary definition of fantasy. It's really small. I'm going to read it to you. So, fantasy, it's a noun, and it's the power or process of creating especially unrealistic or improbable mental images in response to psychological need. Also, a mental image or a series of mental images, such as a daydream, so created. So, intuitively, the things that are standing out to me about fantasy is that they're especially unrealistic. I also think it's interesting that they're described as improbable because this feels like it has some type of connection to math, like mathematics or maybe statistics, right? Like the probability. The probability of like probability feels like a mathematics term to me. So it's also interesting that they're called mental images, especially in response to psychological need. My first instinct is to ask, like, what is the definition? Like, how do you determine what someone psychologically needs? I'm sure that's a question for a psychologist. But I would argue that imagination doesn't require you to have some type of psychological need. I think it might be a spiritual need, but not psychological. Okay. And then I also, the reason why I guess I put the header for this is manifesting dreams instead of fantasies, instead of manifesting imagination or like manifesting with imagination instead of fantasies, is because when I took the screenshot for this, obviously, I saw such as daydream. So, like, here, a mental image is defined as, or I guess here it's indicated that mental images and daydreams are synonymous with each other. So really, this is an unrealistic or improbable daydream in response to psychological need. So then I had to ask myself, okay, well, what's the importance of a daydream? Why does this word exist, and what is it attempting to encapsulate or like hold on to and depict? And now I'm gonna touch these. So now I can make you super tiny. Boom. So now we know what a fantasy is. The next thing I want to discuss is now, what is imagination defined as? Imagination. It's also a noun. It's the act or power of forming a mental image of something not present to the senses or never before wholly perceived in reality. This is like a common phrase that I've heard with imagination is figment of your imagination. Um, it might help to know a little bit about what a figment is and like why this phrase is important and like why as collectively as a society why we use this phrase often enough for me to know what that is, to like have heard that before. So again, here like mental image, I'm gonna double check. Yeah, okay. So here fantasy is also defined specifically mental image. Remember, mental image is a synonym for daydream. Those two can be interchanged, I'm assuming. So here, fantasies do have something to do with mental images. These things are really important. Matter of fact, I'm going to put them on a different layer because they're so important. So one thing that they do share is that they require or they involve mental images. So this is some type of faculty or function that's especially important. So regardless of no matter what, when it comes to being human, I would assume mental images are very important. And like, duh, we know this, right? But I am kind of teaching this to you and I'm exploring this with myself as if I'm like fifth grade me. And so here, okay, it's important that they're not present. So here with imagination, it's important that the mental image is of something that's not present. With fantasy, the mental image is of something that's improbable or highly unrealistic. Keep that in mind, right? It's also simply defined imagination as a creative ability. It's pretty straightforward. The ability to confront and deal with a problem. A synonym would be resourcefulness. The thinking or active mind. It seems like here, I guess I'm not sure if these are indicated as synonyms or if they're there's another word for that I don't know, but like an overhead category, like interest, they might just be synonyms though. And then a creative product of the mind. I think that's also really interesting. A creative product. I'm not sure we read the word creative anywhere in the definition of fantasy. Okay, so I think with these two, now that I'm moving it around, I see something. I'm gonna show you in just a second. I'm gonna put imagination. Actually, I guess it should go on this side, huh? It's early, girl. Look at me acting like I don't know how to use Procreate. And then dream. Cool. And I'm gonna read the definition of dream to you, and we'll look around at that before I show you what I was looking at before, because it might also exist in this as well. All right, dream. Dream is also a noun, a series of thoughts, images, or emotions occurring during sleep. So automatically, you gotta be asleep, girl. And fantasy was linked to daydreams, which are like a diluted form of sleep, right? So I would argue that fantasy is leaning more towards dreaming than it is imagination. But I'll have to dig into that more. We'll kind of look at that. So sleep is really important here. a series of thoughts, images, or emotions. I'm not sure if all of those are included in your mental image. I feel like they might be. An experience of waking life having the characteristics of a dream, such as a visionary creation of imagination, a state of mind marked by abstraction or release from reality, an object seen in a dreamlike state. So I'm wondering, why is it important? Why is an abstraction specifically linked to dreams? Okay, that one feels pretty simple. I was just thinking for a moment. So now I can release this one from the folder. I'm doing my best to keep these as organized as possible, because if not, then you'll be having a crazy time, and so will I, girl. And so, really, what I was looking at before in fantasy and imagination is that they have the buzzword power. They also both share the word mental images. And so, that makes me feel like mental images require some form of power. And then I also, in that introductory video, I started to kind of intuitively discuss what I felt was happening with the different sides of the brain in relation to fantasy versus imagination. And so obviously, I had recorded that video before I bothered to look up a diagram of the brain. This came from a kid's magazine online. I'll link the reference in the description box. I'll also link any references for the previous video. If they're not linked in that actual video, I'll link them here. Um, Maybe I'll link them both ways. I don't know, girl. Whatever. But yes, this came from a kid's website. So it had pretty much a really simple series. It was maybe 3 paragraphs of a breakdown of what this diagram was about, and then it was already it had already been labeled. And when at the time of me recording that initial video, I had not looked for a diagram of the brain, and I had not done any reading. Okay. So obviously, imagination is right here on the right side of the brain. If you're bad, I always do this. I have no shame, girl. But just so we know. And so over here we have imagination. Um, there's not fantasies anywhere in here, but if we look, math, girl, math. Math is on the left side of the brain. And if we remember before, when I was looking at fantasy, I was wondering, does it have anything to do with math? Because of the word improbable. So because math is automatically linked to the left side of the brain, and because here in the definition of fantasy, there's a word that's being used that indicates to me something about mathematics. There's some essence of mathematics that exists in the essence of fantasy. And so naturally, I would feel it does belong on the left side of the brain. So let me just write these in really quick. And then I'll just like squiggle a brain on here for you. Boom. So now we're here. So, how does all of this relate to manifestation? That was the whole point of this topic. That was the sentiment and the information that I was trying to gain a better understanding of. Is why in the manifestation community do people seem to really struggle with visualizing? Why do they seem to struggle with experiencing things in their imagination through their senses? And why does there seem to be a lot of misinterpretation of what Neville meant when he said feel it real, or feeling is the secret? I would argue because our society is left brained. We operate from that side of our brain that's more logical. Where's my brain girl? Sequence, analysis, linear, math, language, verbal, logic. Those are the things that are controlled by the left side of the brain. And if I'm not mistaken, also the right side of the body. So I feel like as a society, we operate in this left side of the brain atmosphere and like state of being generally. And so subconsciously a there's an inherent misunderstanding of the essence and the muscle required for imagination, because these things, intuition, creative arts, feelings, rhythm, nonverbal, and imagination, these things are not valued in our society. And so when you come into the world of consciously manifesting your reality, and then you realize that imagination is the strongest and most effective path to experiencing the things you want to experience, people will find themselves in the loop of struggling and going, oh, I don't know what I'm doing wrong or why I'm not understanding this, because I know I need to feel it real. I know I need to imagine it. I know that if I can see it, then I can have it. But then why isn't it working? Why am I thinking about it and I'm imagining and it's not manifesting? And that's because they don't realize that they're operating and they're using the muscle, they're using the side of their brain that controls fantasy, and it controls the essence of something that is dreamlike. I want to explore that a little bit more too, of like why fantasy is so close to being dreamlike, and or why it's associated in that way, and why that can disconnect you from imagining things effectively, but also how the dreamlike state can also benefit you and make things easier. Because I do think that daydreaming is the middle line and the balance here between fantasy and imagination. So maybe let's dig into that a little bit more, and then I'll kind of leave it there for now. So already, like where we left off, mental images, I feel that they require power, and that's indicated in the definitions of both fantasy and imagination. That is something that they share. That is part of the reason why people can be in the realm of fantasy and believe that they're actually in the realm of imagination, because they are misinterpreting like they have a similar energy a little bit, kinda. So if you're picking up that a little bit, kinda, you'll mistake one for the other, is my point. And then how do I want to go about this? Let me think about this for a moment. Okay, I think I see. So let me attempt to bring you to some type of solution, some type of positive resolution ending for this discussion. Okay, like at least you can take something away from here. Solution? Question mark? Because I'm not sure if this will work, but these are my thoughts. Let's use green. Daydreaming. I'm gonna keep this real short and sweet because this video is already pushing half an hour. And if you've been hanging out with me for this long, thanks, girl. Or thanks, guy. I love you. I appreciate you. Not me making that star worse. Can you believe there used to be a point in time where if I had made the star ugly the first time, I would have had to fix it in like not 3 seconds. It would have taken me a lot longer. Anyways, daydreaming. I'm gonna give you 2 points about daydreaming. I don't even know what those points are right now. I'm intuitively off the dome right now, girl. From my brain, off my brain cell right now, daydreaming, it obviously happens during the day. And in our society, in this day and age, we typically are awake during the day and it's light outside. I think the sun being up is important to daydreaming. I think the sun being up and us sleeping has a different effect than when the moon is up. Or I guess, girl. mm, Obviously, I guess daydreaming kind of happens when you don't really try to daydream, huh? I guess when we go to sleep, we're intentionally planning to go to sleep most of the time. But with daydreaming, typically you're attempting to stay awake, or you want to stay awake, and you kind of you kind of nod off into the sleep. And I'm sure there's something about the brain waves when we daydream. I don't think we get all the way into, what is it, REM sleep, like the deepest stage of sleep. I don't think we can actually reach REM sleep or REM stage when we're daydreaming. And I would assume that's because of, usually the scenario doesn't allow us to fall fully asleep. It's like most of the time when I've been daydreaming, I've been in class, or I've been at work, or in the middle of doing something that either I'm supposed to be really focused, or it doesn't require a lot of focus at all. My brain kind of floats off. But I feel almost like when I'm washing dishes, I don't really daydream when I'm washing dishes, because I think that floatiness allows you to float off so much because you're not really focused. Your body goes into autopilot. You're doing a simple task. You float off almost into almost into fantasy. Like, I think daydreaming lives down the center. So if imagination is over here and fantasy is over here with math, because like fantasy contains math secretly, I would argue that daydreaming exists like this. Yeah, I would argue that daydreaming is the space here that we occupy, where we're lighting up both aspects of the brain. Ooh, okay, we're definitely getting somewhere. There will for sure be a part 3 to this. I guess this one is technically the part 1. The first video is really just, it was just an introductory note for myself so that I could hold on to the concept and work on it more. But I think we're here. Daydreaming is this space. So I would argue that daydreaming is going to be my hack for visualization. You have to find the right formula, and I will explore this formula. I might be able to find a neutral one that people can customize and apply to themselves. That would be my intention, at least. But I would assume there's some type of series of variables that you could put together that will make it more likely for you to daydream. And in that daydreaming, you'll be able to access the information, the sensory information, the feeling that will allow you to experience it and feel it real. And that's how you'll be able to manifest things a little easier. You'll be able to experience them a lot easier, because that's also the issue with manifesting, I think, is especially when you're trying to bridge the gap between little baby manifestations, like I manifested a job, or I manifested getting the day off from school or whatever, or more vacation time or something. And on the other side of that is something much larger, like I manifested a all paid trip to Costa Rica, or I manifested a $5 million mansion in Belize, or some, like some crazy, like something that starts to get very, like, it starts to feel very fantastical to someone who doesn't have access to the right side of their brain, and they don't understand that that person's just accessing the infinite possibility and the potentiality of the universe. Essentially, like, there's infinite amount of ways that anything can happen, and you can put any type of variables together. There's no such thing as anything really being impossible. It's just a state of mind and a series of beliefs. Anyways, I don't want to go too deep into that. I want to like close this out fully so that I can come back to it and we're all on the same page. Okay, so daydreaming is in the center, I believe. This is my intuitive guesstimation. Somewhere in between the left and the right side of the brain, you occupy this space when we're daydreaming, and you're lighting up different aspects. So that little diagram before, let's say we're manifesting, I don't know. Okay, I'll use myself for example. Let's say I'm manifesting more sales in my business, and I'm someone who, I'm not very imaginative. I struggle with visualization, and I'm operating from the left side of my brain, even if I really don't want to, like, even if I'm not aware. So if you were daydreaming, I would assume you would occupy this physical space, or I guess this energetic space between the brain, and like connect the brain cells and stuff. And then it would light up like, okay, money, so sales, let's say analysis. I would require some form of analysis, and math for sure. If I have a certain sales goal that I'm trying to reach every month, I'm going to use the left side of my brain to access math and analyzing and understanding that math so that I can plan out how many items or how many products I need to sell to hit my goal, right? Like I have to do math and I have to connect that math to what it is I'm attempting to sell, which I feel is like analysis. Maybe a mathematician might feel differently. Feel free to chime in. It's also going to require me to access the right side of my brain to do something like mm, 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 obviously imagination, you need that. And mm, mm, okay, nonverbal and feelings. I need to access the right side of my brain to connect to my feelings, my nonverbal feelings, obviously in imagination, which is daydreaming. Like daydreaming is the love child between fantasy and imagination. So let's say I'm daydreaming. Let's say I don't know, like I'm outside walking the dog. And I'm walking the dog and I start daydreaming because I'm like kind of aware of my message. I'm kind of aware my awareness is in my environment, but not so much that I feel hyper aware and that I need to be alert. And the dog is fine. She's walking fine. She's not pulling or distracting me. So it creates this scenario where I'm able to daydream as I'm walking because I'm walking a way that I always walk. So my body can take over when it comes to autopilot and I can guide myself home physically without mentally having to think about it, which frees up enough of my brain cells for me to be able to go into a state of daydreaming just for a moment. And I daydream that just for a moment. Someone messages me, I get on Instagram, I see my DMs, and someone has messaged me and they're asking to purchase 500 units of my product. They want to do wholesale. They have a shop in, I don't know, fucking Antarctica, and for whatever reason they found me on Instagram and they want to buy some of my stuff in bulk and sell it over there. And I imagine that, and of course I'm thinking number, like I access the left side of my brain at first to think about me selling the stuff, and this is a limited amount of space, and so I can only really think about one or two scenarios in which I'm selling my products and I get the money for it, and I'm able to sell as many units as I have calculated through my math and analysis that I need to sell. Here, I'm also though imagining how I'm going to feel in those few scenarios where I've manifest or where I've sold the things that I want to sell. But when you're daydreaming and you're freed up and you've accessed both sides of the brain together, you have access to scenarios where the numbers make sense with the nonverbal feeling. So, how I would feel when I read that message, knowing that someone would want to buy some of my products in bulk, I might not have the words for that because I've never experienced that before. So that's nonverbal, but I'm definitely going to feel it and experience it. And it's going to be those feelings because I don't have the words for them already. Those feelings are going to be related to the numbers and the money. So, like the person saying, I want 500 units and I'm willing to pay you this much, those are the things that will generate the feeling for me and the sensory response for me because that's the only point of reference that I have. That's that might be a bit abstract and kind of heady, but I hope someone can take something from that. That's where I'm at right now with it. Let's I keep saying I'm gonna wrap this up, but I'm gonna let it find a good natural point of wrapping up, I guess. Let's do some cleaning and some organizing, girl. I will hold on to this for later. And I will definitely come back to this if I get enough comments or I see that there's enough interest that people want to explore some of these discussions more. I would love to do more of them, but only the ones that people actually want to talk about, you know? Like I've done enough of thinking to myself and like conversing and brainstorming with God about things, it would be nice to get external input at this point. Okay. So yes, I left us here. Possible solution. I don't know, girl, but I am gonna propose one. Daydreaming. Like I said, there's I'm sure some type of formula. We can get into the fine details of that if anyone actually wants to. But I would say daydreaming is the middle ground between fantasy and imagination, which is left brain, right brain. I guess I should have. I'm thinking of a practical point that I can follow this up with that will actually mean something that you can apply. Give me a moment, girl. Let me rub my brain cells together. Hmm. This might be a little off base, but this is what I'm feeling intentionally. Yeah, and intuitively. Like I said, it's still a little off base right now. This definitely can warrant more exploration. But that's what I'm feeling. If you can't move the variables around in your life right now to cultivate the space for you to relax just enough to take a daydream break, but not fall fully into sleep, I would argue to take a spontaneous nap. Spontaneous meaning, obviously, outside of your responsibilities, when you find yourself with time to do something that you want to do, but nothing has to be done, I would encourage you to opt for a nap just because it will break your typical routine. It'll be something that you don't do very often. And I think that might be the closest way, that might be the closest cheat code to accessing the daydream state if you're someone who's really busy and has a lot of responsibility. I feel like if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of responsibility, or if you're just naturally kind of floaty in your focus, I think you can access the daydreaming state better. And this is sometimes why people who seem kind of out of it and not really present and in their own world, this is why they seem to have things work out for them the most. Because I think they can access the daydream state easier than people who are more focused and honed in on something. That's just a guesstimation from a bit of experience that I've had with people and my own personal experience, but definitely I haven't done any data or like studies around that. honestly, there's no studies around any of this if you haven't already assumed that. But these are just my intuitive, like, out in the wild, raw experience studies of life. Um, yeah, people who are really someone who's coming to mind is Kitty Lever. I see her on Instagram, and she does. I think she did that bit with gosh, it's like the girl when you ask her for gum, whatever. If you've seen it, then you definitely know. Um, I feel like people like the archetype that she was kind of embodying and kind of making fun of in a way, and like doing it in a silly kind of fun way. That's a real type of person. That's a real state for people. Like there are people who live in that state, like that's their day-to-day life. And I would argue that they seem to have some of the most magical, which is kind of what her video is like getting at, is they seem to have some of the most magical, playful, fun lives, and everything just works out for them. They never have any problems, or if they do, they don't even care. They don't even notice that it's a problem because they're in their own world. I think some people live in the daydream state, and they are constantly firing up both parts of their brain in unison with each other and in harmony, and that's why things work out for them. That's that whole path of least resistance thing. That's that whole path of least effort. Like, what's the thing that you can do that would require the least amount of effort, the least amount of energy? Sometimes it's better to do nothing at all and to not try. Sometimes it's better to detach and drop your manifestation. These are things that you'll hear in the manifestation community, right? So, I mean, those are things that I've heard. Those are things that I've read. I don't know about you, girl, but I'm just saying. I've seen it enough to assume that it's probably not just me. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave this here. This definitely feels like an open conversation about manifestation. I have been on a very interesting journey with manifestation, and I want to teach it to people. And God and I have a very specific agreement on how I have to teach it. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little nervous, girl. I'm a little nervous because I don't know if it'll be too abstract and too heady and too wordy and whatever, like too convoluted and all that good stuff. So I have my own human concerns about taking this approach. So I would love to hear some feedback, whether it's good feedback, whether it's bad feedback. I'm here for it either way, just so that I can take that information and do with it what I will, which is what everyone does that anyways, right? Like you learn information and then you do with it what you feel like doing with it. So in this case, I'm asking for more feedback, because this approach feels fun, but I also still wanted to have a clear direction, and I still wanted to feel like a full lively interactive conversation instead of just me presenting information to you in a way that's very static and very boring, and it doesn't leave space for nuance or context or all that stuff. So anyways, if you made it to the end, sorry, I just hit my table. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Just a little bit of updates, shop stuff. If you are interested in any of the art that I make, if you're interested in coloring pages, that is the side quest that I'm on right now in my career, is making more coloring pages and making more coloring books. And I'm going the digital printable route right now because I have a very specific vision for how I want the books to be. I've done books in the past and they were cool for the time, but where I am now in my life, I have different expectations and standards for myself. So for now, the coloring pages are digital downloads. You will have to print them. I don't own a printer, girl. I go to my local library when I need to print stuff, just an FYI. So if you are interested, but that's your hurdle, is that, oh, you don't have a printer and you don't know how you're going to access them fully. If you have a local library, start there. I pay them like 25 cents a page. I don't feel fussy about that. It's not a big deal. So anyways, Etsy is where I'm putting the coloring pages right now. And that's until I get the space and the time and the energy to put together a new website. Again, my standards, my expectations, you know the drill. So Etsy is where you can find coloring pages. I have a few packs up right now. The packs are really small because the designs are very experimental. I'm trying out some new stuff, so I would really love to get feedback on the coloring pages if you happen to grab one. I have free coloring pages on my Gumroad. Those are the same quality as the paid ones that I have on my Etsy. I just wasn't, for whatever reason, satisfied with them, but I still wanted to make them available to people. So you can go to Gumroad if you want to test out some free pages and kind of get a feel for my art style and where it's at right now in my evolution. And I want to say that's about it for right now. Um, I'm working on some stickers for Etsy. So my question, I guess, is where do you like to put stickers? I'm someone who collects them and then I kind of never use them. I just started to put them on my sketchbooks. Ooh, actually, I can show you right now. I can show you right now. Well, I guess maybe I should turn on like a real light. Yeah. There we go. Stickers. So this is where I'm at right now. Um, and so every time I draw in this sketchbook, I just slap a couple stickers on there because I don't have anywhere else to put them. And I guess that's just my way of marking it. And I figure once I'm done with it, then I'll just have a collection of finished books that are covered in stickers. And I think that's kind of cool, I guess. I don't know. Like, there's some reason why I chose these at whatever time instead of different ones. So it'll be cool. It'll be cool when I have enough of them and you can look at them together and kind of see the difference in composition in the stickers. Also, I just don't want them to sit in a drawer somewhere and get dusty and old, and that's pointless too. So yeah. So I just want to know where people are putting stickers right now. I don't really see them very much on Stanleys or laptops anymore. I don't know if people still put stickers on their laptops, but if you are someone who likes them, if even if you just collect them, even if you put them in a binder, a folder,